I want to start this off by saying that the weather has been incredibly weird. There are moments whenever, because of where this is built, this is up against the basement walls, and it's extremely frigid right now in Missouri. And even earlier today, getting out in the sun for a bit, like if you were directly in the sun and you were inside a car, you would bake like a potato. But if you stepped outside and the wind caught you, you were cold. And right now, I've got a temperature panel on my computer that shows like the overall internal temperature of the computer. It's really pretty cool. The thing about it is that it basically showcases what the temperature is sort of down here. It's always about 10 degrees lower, and even with the heater and that sort of thing on, it gets to 60 degrees down here pretty easily. But I overheat and go back and forth. Such is the problem with having a studio underground, partially underground. I'm enjoying orange juice tonight. I try not to drink too much of it. Not because I don't like it. I mean, I love it. But I had a really bad bout that was damn near pneumonia a while back, years and years ago when I was still working at Geroto. And I had this cough that just wouldn't stop for anything. I was just coughing and coughing, to the point to where 3 different times when I was coughing, passed out. Like coughed so hard, it was like whooping cough, which I don't know if you guys have heard of that. My father had that and described it to me one time. And I thought, that's got to be what that must have felt like. I mean, like my abs hurt, my chest hurt, everything, my back, everything was in pain. I was so scared to cough. And when I did cough, it just went on and on and on. It sounded like, not quite like the rattle of a smoker's cough. It was just deep and unyielding. And what scared me at one point, it's a little bit TMI, but just something, that so you guys will know. When I coughed at one point, like, normally if you have any phlegm or anything inside, it'll still be the temperature of what it should be on the inside. I coughed at one point, and I remember that day feeling really ragged. Like my lungs felt like sandpaper. It was really scary. And when I coughed, the phlegm was cold. Coming out, it was terrifying. That's when I was like, I need to go to the hospital. And the doctor did not play around. He was like, you were really close to having pneumonia. And he was pretty pissed. He was like, what were you thinking? Your cough is horrible. So they put me on antibiotics. I think I was on Z-Paks like crazy for a couple weeks. But I was doing everything under the sun to prevent. I was like drinking orange juice by the gallon. People were questioning it. I remember coming into work with like 2-gallon jugs of orange juice just to drink that down because I was thirsty and I was like, okay, surely the vitamin C, will help me out. And it didn't do shit. It gave me an upset stomach, and it made me a little averted to the flavor of it. But now, finally, after a few years, I'm like, it's not too bad. Oh man. Speaking of years passing by, I saw something earlier. I don't even know why I didn't think about this. I know that time passes by, right? That's a general acceptance and a discussion point that I bring up a lot of times. Sometimes it's weird whenever you're not paying attention. All of a sudden, you'll look at something or you'll look for something and go, wait, is that no longer a thing? How many of you guys remember Orange County Choppers, West County Choppers, all that stuff? I think it was on History or Discovery Channel for a long time. I haven't had cable TV in like 13 years, right? I stream, I have a massive DVD collection, all kinds of stuff like that. So I don't really do that. I'll stream, and if it's on there, I'll watch it, but I'm usually pretty repetitive on what I watch. Evidently, at some point in time, one of them, I think Orange County Choppers may have gone out of business or they split or something. West Coast Choppers, I think, had gone into bankruptcy and all this other stuff, but the reason all that came about was I saw this video on TikTok where there was a guy talking about how one of the chopper places had this massive liquidation sale, and they were relocating down to Florida. So I think it was the one where it had the angry dad and older son that were always arguing back and forth. I want to say that was Orange County Choppers. And so it led to this whole thing where, the divide happened. And I guess whenever this guy purchased it, so he claims in the video anyway, this was an $86,000 custom chopper. But he breaks down the components on it, and I was pretty shocked. I've never really looked at those bikes. I love motorcycles. I've only ever ridden one or two in my life, and that didn't go very well. I still have a dream that someday I'll be able to get one and learn how, but it's not at the forefront of what I want right now. My favorite bike that I've ever seen in person was the Suzuki Marauder. I think now it's called the Victory or something, if they even still make it. But specifically the Marauder, when I saw it at a bike night, and I fell in love with that bike. It had like that sort of 1950s aesthetic that like some Indian and some Harley Davidson motorcycles had, sort of a Sportster sort of look to it. It's probably the first motorcycle that I was like, holy shit. The other motorcycle that I saw that I really liked was clearly a custom-made one. It was all steampunked out. And I saw that one in Chicago. And I later found out that there's a couple of them out there like that. But I saw it again later on Pinterest or something. It was one of the most beautiful bikes I'd ever seen. It was another like soft tail looking thing, but it was amazing. It was absolutely stunning. And, you know, like aside from the aesthetics and the coolness of a motorcycle, you know, I don't draw them. I don't really have much to do with them. And I don't know too many people that ride them. I know a few, but not like I ride with them. I don't even have a bike. And I remember thinking when I was watching this video, like how weird it was that he was going on about how he'd purchased, like originally the sticker price on it had been like $80,000, but he got it for $8,000 and was saying, today I couldn't even sell it for that. I'd probably have to take $3,000. And even then it's the sum of its parts as raw material was worth way more. And it was just, then I ended up doing, you know how you do those deep dives all of a sudden, like normally when you're in bed, you're just like looking at something and like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Holy shit, what? You know, and all this other stuff. And I remember at that point in time, like just the weird outlaw biker kind of thing that surrounded all that. And how that was specifically, like, I want to say that was right around the 2010 area, right? I could be wrong. Correct me on that. I didn't really look too much beyond that. I remember that Jesse James guy said, oh, he was a descendant of Jesse James. And then I think recently it came out that he was full of shit, that like other people were like, no, he wasn't. No. And even like the whole mess that he had with Sandra Bullock and all this other stuff. And then the dad and son from Orange County, I think, broke apart and went and did their own thing. But I was blown away that this guy was able to get something that had been at one point in time on their showroom floor, available for sale for $80,000. Okay. And I remember seeing at a couple car shows where people would show up with these things, and this was years ago at World of Wheels here in Kansas City. In fact, it was the same show that I met Henry Winkler at. And which wonderful, wonderful memory. But I remember seeing these incredible prices on them. I'm like, who the fuck pays $120,000, $80,000, $60,000 for these custom bikes? But I realized back then they were one of one. They were really, truly works of art. But he went on to explain this one that he had. And I think the guy's username on TikTok is Christian Beard or something like that. But he went on to say how there's no suspension in the seat. It rides really hard. There was no freaking gauges on it. I didn't even realize that. And I guess that's a thing. They didn't put gauges on them. It had no way to track its mileage. So it had this tag on it basically that was like TMU, which is something like trip measurement unknown or something along that line. But you just didn't know how many actual miles were on it. I didn't even have a fuel gauge from what I saw. It was really surreal. And the entire time I'm thinking about this, I'm like, okay, well, this kind of mirrors a lot of things that happens with not just technology, but art and other stuff, and how sometimes patience, or in my case, ignorance, ends up lending itself to a better hand of being able to buy something that isn't as much in demand. Now, truthfully, retro tech and nostalgia can definitely drive prices back up. But I've noticed that artwork doesn't necessarily universally apply to that. If you're a well-known artist, or you're somebody that has, a piece that goes viral, or you're just you're it for that moment, you're the it guy, the it girl, whatever. That's pretty cool, and I'm happy for people like that. I've never had anything like that happen. I've known a few people that have, and it is crazy watching that sort of thing happen. Because you'll see these prices where they go like, I'll give you a really good example. Somebody might do, like maybe they do 8x8 paintings, and their current price is a fairly good price point of about maybe $400. Okay, it's pretty average, or what it should be. And if you're at the right level of expertise and ability, that's a fair to very low end price. And then I've seen people that do an 8x8 painting, acrylic, oil, whatever, and they'll command $2,000, $3,000 for it. There is a lady named Ashley Longshore that, if you follow her, it is like if you took, and I'm not even being mean when I say this, I swear to God I'm not. If you took aspects of Lady Gaga, and I'm trying to remember her name, the actress's name just left my head, but she's always playing comedy roles. She was in Bridesmaids, as the friend that used the sink as the bathroom, Melissa McCarthy. If you took those two people and put them together and threw a bit more rudeness, audaciousness, and overpowered personality into there. So was Amy Schumer, I think, that comedian, kind of merged those three people together, and you get Ashley Longshore. Now, in no context am I meaning that as a negative. I'm simply saying those are the three people that really kind of come to mind. And if you go to Ashley Longshore's website, which is a trip, you'll see that she does a lot of pop art stuff, and she does a lot of different things, and her prices are really high. And I'm grateful that, there are artists out there that are able to make a living like that and do that sort of thing. It's mind-blowing. And I always think to myself, like, when people buy artwork, are they buying it for the investment? Are they buying it in the event somebody gets famous? And it leaves this whole wide open, introspection and speculation, and sometimes people getting really angry about things. I have seen crazy things get, slabbed. And so if you're not familiar with that term, I don't think it has any connotation or connection to like the funeral parlor kind of thing. I've seen people, one of the, in videos I've done, like when I go to shows, you'll see things that are like in acrylic cases, rare old toys, a shadow box filled with turn of the century tools, maybe some extremely old pen nibs. Now, I find it really fascinating how, for some people, it's about the emotional connection. I have a bunch of nibs over here. They're a little ragged, a little torn up. They were given to me by a fellow I had worked with, really pretty cool guy, Rick Stacy, and he'd worked in DC Comics and I think on Marvel for a little bit too. And I was familiar with his work on Warlord, the DC title, as well as, and I think that was through DC as well, the Twilight Zone. He had done, I think, 1 or 2 issues where he had inked those and drawn them, penciled them. And so I kept those. Now, do I have any monetary gain on them? I don't think so. It wouldn't really matter, because they were, granted, he didn't want them, but he was like, I don't really use these pens. Do you use them? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to have those nibs. And, some of them were pretty rough because they were well worn in and used and bent and everything. But I like that distressed look when I do ink, and I use that stuff. But more importantly, it was just a gift from another artist to me. And so I was like, well, I'm going to keep that. And here's one I got. This is something I picked up in, this is a random little brush for cleaning off my artwork, because I used to use my hand and smear shit everywhere. And I used to use one of these. This is made by the company Alvin, and it's just a little mini duster. I think this is horsehair. I think it is. I don't think that's synthetic. And then the handle is just injection molded plastic, a little bit of a grain on it. It's really pretty. But Alvin makes good draftsmanship stuff. And when I still wanted to be an architect, I was taking a lot of drafting classes in school, and I had one of these. And I kind of lament that I never got those, because those had, I think those were horsehair as well too, but the handle was this beautiful walnut. It was just freaking gorgeous. I loved it. But I found this one at not a thrift store, an estate sale in Louisiana. And there was a bunch of other components and pieces and parts I picked up too. I picked up, like, it came with a ruler, a couple of drafting pens and pencils, some erasers, and some other stuff. And evidently the gentleman who had passed away, that was one of his tools. And I think I've got some other ones here too, like some real oddball stuff. But Yeah, no, I don't know where the rest of the things are, but and nonetheless, the point I'm making is, I think I paid $5 for this box of drafting tools and art supplies, and I mean, if I bought the new ones now, probably be about $30 or $40. And it made me think about, like, what the worth is of something, just in general. It seems so liquid, right? One man's trash is another man's treasure. I live around a score of scrappers and upcyclers in this area. I'd like to think I'm one as well too, on a much lower, lesser scale, but I do similar things. My neighbor is extremely talented. A young man. He's about 21, 22 years old. And I've watched him over the last few months barter and pay for and find and assemble a quad runner. It's insane. This is what it looks like. This is him working on it. Fucked with my head. I just was like, what? That's some Mad Max Fury Road shit right there. And I think I'll be okay as long as he doesn't spray his mouth and scream out, "Witness me" at some point in time. I think I'm fine. But I'm blown away by people like that. And I've talked to a few of the scrappers that take stuff around here, and I've certainly put things outside that they've taken, and they have interest in a lot of different things, when they're getting the raw materials out of them and trading, selling, doing what they can with them. And these are the legit guys. These are not the guys crawling underneath your car to get a catalytic converter off or anything else like that. These are people just trying to make some extra money, and maybe that's what they're also doing full time, but they're honest. I'd like to think most of them are. But I've been places before, even when I went to, those were the days in Warrensburg, which is a massive secondhand place with like all these booths and stuff. I'll find things there that I could give two damns about, maybe old porcelain, figurines of like cows or something. What am I going to do with that? But I know somebody would come along and might look at any number of things like, well, I'll show you this here. Like, here's a random ass thing. This is one of my favorite things just because he has his own little Copic marker. This is Sketchbot. And I love his little Copic marker, clearly influenced little marker. Just fits in his hand. It's just a cool thing. I got this off Tenacious Toys, and I love it. It sits over here on top of my marker display as I knock some of my markers over. And, I think I got that. He might have been $10 or $15. I don't really remember what the price was. It doesn't matter. I think it's wonderful. So it made me think back to the whole motorcycle thing. Like, how does something go from being worth $80,000 down to nothing? Basically, right? It's a huge lost investment for the company that made it, but it clearly may not have been comprised of components that were that much, right? It might have been $10,000, $15,000 worth. And then so you're talking about the labor and the creation and the custom wheels and all these other things that amassed up to the price point that they thought it was worth. Then at some point you cut your losses and then you go, no, fuck it. It's worth $8,000. This is where we're going to get rid of it at, because $8,000 is better than nothing. And I wonder if that's always been the case, right? Has that always been how retail or selling has been? At some point in time we get tired and we just sell something off and it doesn't hold its value. I'm always blown away, and this is something that pisses a lot of people off when I talk about it, but I'm being truthful on this because I witnessed this happen firsthand. If you're married, I dare you to go to a jeweler, and if you know the price of your ring, now please, I'm gonna put a qualifier on this. Just, hey, let me preface this. Only do this if you don't really give a fuck about how much your ring is worth. I mean that, okay? Sincerely. Let's just, because what is it? I'm not even sure what the saying is anymore. It's like, what is it? A ring, like maybe the engagement ring or something is like 3, 4, 5 years of your life earnings. No, it's like 3, 4 months or something shit like that. Whatever it is, that's the amount that it is. And then like the whole set or whatever it is. I know everyone has different things. go in, if you have a diamond set in it or whatever, and it's like white gold, whatever these rings are, go in, remember that number in your head. Ask for that same number back from the jeweler. You'll never get it. That worth point isn't there. You might get a couple $100. You might get $50. You might get refused. There is nothing really that you can do with that. And I've seen it happen. I've known friends that either got divorced or something like that, like, fuck this, I'm getting rid of this wedding ring. And they went in, they were like, that motherfucker wasn't going to give me $20 for this thing. This is a $500 ring. And these are, I remember one dude in specific, he had this really beautiful one that was kind of woven together. And it was, I guess it was 24 karat gold. I don't know. I know a lot about metals in that regard, but not how the jewelry aspect works or what the demand is for that. I just don't know. And if you talk to jewelers at shows, they're never really that open about it. I think they kind of are in on that whole joke. I'm like, I'm going to sell it to you, but this really ain't worth shit. And I'm not knocking jewelers that make beautiful work. I have some incredible handmade stuff from jewelers that, yeah, it was absolutely worth their time. But those people made it. They forged it. They created those things. They worked the metallurgical aspects of it. They cast it. They polished it. All that stuff. And I've got some mass-produced ones that I just love for what they were. But they also didn't cost me an arm and a leg. And I find it really funny that certain things like jewelry, like clothing, whatever, can depreciate so quickly. And one would argue, well, that's demand and so forth. But I think it's more than that. I think it's our mentality to quickly want to get rid of things, or we just don't really realize that we will attach a very homespun attitude about what we have and what it's worth. And to the next person, they're like, I don't care. I always use this like comparison metaphor, but unless you've read The Lord of the Rings, you don't really understand what it means. In the book, and this is one of the reasons why I was fascinated by how Peter Jackson did the character of Faramir. In there, he is almost pulled in by the ring when he takes Frodo and Sam in with the rest of the Rangers, and he's holding him captive. And he almost falls to the same weakness that his elder brother Boromir did. But in the book, I think, and I'm paraphrasing because it's been a while since I've read it, he says something akin to the point of like, I would not pick up this thing if I found it by the wayside. He didn't care for it. The ring meant nothing. So in that context, in the book, it makes sense. He's a much more pure character. He is not Boromir. There is no real comparison point in there except the opposite actions. In the movie, it drove the narrative better from a visual standpoint to understand what this ring represented and how it affected many people, many different people that were good on different ways, different levels, and how much it was torturing Frodo. If for some reason Faramir had said, oh, I wouldn't pick that ring up, I don't care about it, it suddenly takes away the impending doom, the evil, the worth of that ring. And you can apply that same sort of information to a lot of things in our lives. And I guess what I'm getting at is sometimes, whenever I'm pricing my artwork or I'm thinking about what I'm doing, if I believe something is worth something, how do I work through the idea that other people may not agree with that? How do I justify it, right? Have there ever been times when you've seen somebody else's artwork and you've been like, that person is full of shit? That's not that. Or do you even have the right to think that way? I mean, I think we all have the right to think that way. Now, whether or not you run up and yell it in their face is a whole completely different thing. You're not immune to whatever the fuck happens to you after that. But there have been times that, I've thought that about my own work. And I often, wonder, like, why is it so hard as artists to establish something that has a worth point that is stable, that will stay that way? I mean, even when I worked at the museum, I walked around there and I'm like, these things are priceless because these people are dead. And even the few, like, the few living artists that would have art in there, it was because they had reached a level of affluence or demand that drove their artwork up. But I've known plenty of people that could do works that are identical in quality, execution, all of it. And yet they wouldn't even begin to gather anywhere near the amount of support or income from it. I've known people that can stream, that can do a stand-up comedy act, that can be in a play, and they'll make you laugh, they'll make you cry, they'll make you think, they'll make you do amazing things, mental gymnastics, for better or for worse. They'll make you imbibe your imagination with worlds that don't exist. You'll invoke the stories that they've lived into your own psyche and enjoy them and drink and bathe in them. That's the intoxicating thing about people that are really fucking good at what they do. You hang on their word. You understand what they're about because you're listening to the narration, the story, that whole point, and they pull you in. And I can give you a perfect example. There's a gentleman that I saw some years ago in Kansas at a bar. He played guitar in a way that made me think of Stevie Ray Vaughan with the technical prowess of Paul Gilbert and the indelible, insane attitude of Prince. He's a blues player, probably in his 60s. And he could do all kinds of music. He was playing in a cover band, and I was stunned. He never really did anything else. When I talked to him after the show and everything else like that, he was like, I've been trying to make it big. And no bands are really that serious, and kind of burned out trying to learn new things and new people and stuff. And so I just kind of stayed with these guys and a couple other bands I play with. But then that ship sailed, and I thought to myself, like, I bought his CD. I have it somewhere in storage, and because I didn't want the band CD. I was like, do you have a CD of your stuff? He said, yeah, I do. It's on my website. And so, his website was one page. I remember that. For the life of me, I don't remember his name right now. My memory's just shot. And that's going to bug me until I find that CD. But I remember it's just like a 6-song EP, and the playing is amazing, but it still pales in comparison to how he performed that evening. But this guy is not known by anybody. And there's thousands, I'd probably say tens of thousands of musicians, artists of all calibers and mediums out there that will never be known, that history will overlook, whose work may never really find an outlet of appreciation. I think it's one of the reasons why even that musician that I was talking about in the last video, Nick Drake, just, he died when he was 22, 24, somewhere in there, in 1974. I think I mentioned that it was like literally 2 days before I was born. And, he went to his grave thinking, knowing that his work didn't sell, that it wasn't popular, that it wasn't accepted by the greater masses, that what he was creating in his mind wasn't worth anything. And yet here I am using a technology he probably never could have even dreamt of to listen to his music, to celebrate his creative spirit and understand who he was. And that to me is amazing. It was one of the things where I believe that, even with no real financial worth on certain things, it doesn't take away from what their meaning really is. It just doesn't, I have a bunch of, well, you guys know this room is basically one big ass museum to the 1980s in my life, but I have a long area up here. It's a shadow box, and it's got the majority of my ranks when I was in Boy Scouts. It's got my these longer badges for the Santa Catalina, Arizona area, my old pack number, my den number, different things like that. Those don't mean anything to anybody else. They mean the world to me. There's stories I told, or They're things I lived. They're moments that I enjoyed. And that is it's such a pivotal thing. Like somebody could come along and offer me $10,000, but like, I need that, right? I can't. I'll never get those back. I could get replicas, but it would never be the same thing. I wonder at times then why people get so mad about NFTs. I'm going to end on this. I don't really care about NFTs. I don't know enough about them, but essentially I think it's a non-fungible token is what it stands for. It's essentially a piece of digital artwork that you have a certification for, that you have ownership of this thing. Now, yes, somebody could make a JPEG of it, but you own this particular one, and there's some sort of digital signature, not signal, that is connected to it. You could sell it to other people and do things like that. I have seen it as a mixed bag. Some people say it's garbage. Some people say it's the next big thing and it just hasn't caught on. I dare say the digital worth has been established in a lot of ways. There are games out there, mobile games. If you play them, casual games, the Jurassic Park game, the Animal Crossing game, different ones like that are for mobile, have a system in there for buying in-game currency for real-world currency. Even prior to that, there were games that allowed you to buy stuff like that. You would find things. I remember finding somebody's account for World of Warcraft. The access key and the username and password was all for sale. It was a character that they had farmed like crazy, and it was available for anyone that wanted it. And I think the bidding got up to, just under $11,000 for that. That's back when World of Warcraft was the thing to do. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. I was like, well, what's the point of that, right? But some people want to win. They want the best things. They want to see it all. They don't have the patience to work for it. So for them, I'll drop $99.99 on all of this virtual cash and coin and icons and items and characters to blow through this game. It's, instant gratification. It's this whole factor of like, I want this thing now. And it's no faster of a deliverable than a digital asset, which is essentially what an NFT is. Yet the moment somebody brings along some sort of archaic terminology for it, most people are quick to knock it down. I even was like, I don't think this is going to work. And I thought it was a scam. I thought it was a pyramid marketing scheme of some sort. I don't know that games aren't. So, mobile ones at least. Anything where you've got, like, it used to be too, like, we've grown to accept things have a worth and that we're willing to pay for extra. If I bought a game for my Sega Genesis, my anticipation was that the company was smart enough to let the developers finish the goddamn game. Granted, there were plenty of games that came out that had massive companies behind them. Atari's E.T. is infamously one of those that was incomplete as hell, had little or nothing to do with the movie. The title screen is the closest you're going to get to feeling any of the evocative and wonder-filled feelings of watching that movie. Otherwise, it's terrible. I have it in my collection. It's absolutely a freaking horrible game. You can see footage of it on YouTube. It's fucking terrible. And, then there was that whole urban legend of all of these copies being buried. And it was found. Some enterprising dude went out and found that damn landfill. And I think there were other games too, because this was right around the first crash of home console games. Before Nintendo and Sega came along, was like, nope, hey, we're going to fix this. And Atari was not doing so great. I think they had gone bankrupt. I'm not sure on that. But again, something that, was professed to have so much worth was going to be this knockout thing, turned out to be dead on arrival. It's a wild thing to think about what worth is and what that means to each one of us. Sometimes, and this is the other thing I was going to say too, like going beyond the aspect of a digital item that people say doesn't exist, right? How much is time worth to you? And this is where I'm going to leave it at. Time is probably the most valuable thing we have. And yet, it's so weird. We measure time by clocks on our phones, on our wrist, on our computers. We measure it by the sun passing by and the moon coming up. But we made the incremental measurements of time, and we adhere to them. We base meetings and work shifts and dates and stuff like that all on it. And it gives us some semblance of positioning. It lets us know how old we are. It lets us know how much time we have left. It lets us know when something may or may not happen down the way. And it is really fascinating to me that if you ask a lot of people, you know, what they would want out of life, you're always going to hear things like, well, I wish I had more money, or I wish I had a bigger house, or, you know, I wish I was younger. But ultimately, those are all things that are connected to time. When people say, well, I wish I could go back to the 1980s. No shit, I kind of wish I could too, but there's so many things today that I would miss. And there's that whole adage of, would you go back if you could? I don't know, you know, because everyone's like, oh, I'd love to go back if I had the knowledge. You know, I'd stop 9/11, I'd buy stock in Apple and Google and become a millionaire and all these other sorts of things. Sure. Okay. You know, but it could also not go that way. You know, we don't know. I mean, it's a toss-up because time travel doesn't exist in the way that we would love it to. And that's even a weirder form of it, to go back, like to be like, boom, I'm going to go back and be young. One of my friends actually posted a really hilarious thing. He made me laugh about this. He was like, fuck everything. I go back and live in an orphanage. I don't need my parents. I don't need nothing. Like if you suddenly became 6 years old today with all of your knowledge, you know, I thought, well, yeah, but who's going to raise you? You know, like if you're older, your parents are old as shit, or if they're even around anymore, where do you go? You can't passively drive anywhere. You couldn't do anything. You can't open an account. Nobody's going to believe you that you suddenly changed to be 6 years old. The whole argument was really weird. So I was like, no, because the other opposite was, if you took the blue pill, you could become 6 years old and live today. With all this knowledge you'd amassed, you just basically restart life. The whole word thing, it was like a word problem. You didn't go back in time. It never said, oh, you get to go back to the jolly old 80s. It meant you become 6 now. And I was like, fuck that. No. God, no, man. The other pill, the red pill, was, or you get, I think, like $200 million right now, cash, whole thing. Fuck that. I'll take the $200 million. There's no way. Yes, in a really weird sort of circumstance, would I love to go back to the 80s? Yeah, but nostalgia's a bitch, and it blocks out a lot of the other shit that happened then, too. It was not a perfect decade. Not by far. There was a lot of shit that went down and a lot of terrible things that I still remember really well. So I'm like, why the hell would you want to go back? If I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, of course I would. There's so many things that were really cool, so many things I would like to have, but it just seems like the craziest thing. It's too easy to lull into the easy answer versus the other one. So, nonetheless, I am going to go ahead and get done here and get on to some other projects. Thanks for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it, and I will certainly be back tomorrow with another journal. Till then, take care.